Top of the morning. Today I want to go through an interesting question by a subscriber asking about required minimum distributions, RMD. It's a particularly interesting question because it has the statistics are backwards from what we're usually looking at, but we can use the same tool to answer the question. We're going to use Portfolio Visualizer to determine the statistics on how close this individual is going to get to paying their required minimum distributions, if they have to pay or not. They're trying to avoid it for future tax management when they hit 72. They don't want to have any RMD. Quick disclaimer. Reminder, everybody, this is for entertainment and educational purposes only. And with that, let's get into it. Okay, today is August 7th. Required minimum distributions is the amount that you're required to take out of your traditional IRA or 401k when you hit a certain age. When you turn 72, you're required to pay the required minimum distribution. And the initial distribution is 3.77%. Here's the statement that this person made that was kind of interesting. I'm planning on avoiding RMD by spending down my IRA before I reach 72. I'm doing this by pulling 10% out annually for the next 10 years. Interestingly enough, my IRA is still growing today, even after pulling 10% out. My first reaction was, you're probably going to hit RMD. But let's go look at the statistics. I have rounded the numbers just to make the math a little cleaner. Let's assume this person is 62. They've got $1 million. They're withdrawing 10% or $100,000 a year. And they want to continue withdrawing $100,000 till this count goes to zero. Will they hit RMD when they're 72? Will they hit that 3.77%? Now, the portfolio does matter. Depending on your portfolio, this is a vastly different set of results. So we're going to take a look at three portfolios. We're going to look at the standard 80-20 portfolio. This is our standard benchmark. We're going to look at the conservative version of that, which has 40% bonds. And then I've got a crazy leverage portfolio, which includes some leveraged ETFs, which probably more closely matches what this individual is carrying. They do carry leveraged ETFs. All right. To do this, we're going to go into portfoliovisualizer.com. And in there, we're going to use the Monte Carlo simulation. This is the one that runs through 10,000 iterations and looks at the spread of the results based upon the standard deviation of all the investments. To set up the Monte Carlo simulation, what you want to do is open it up and then change the portfolio type to tickers. Got $1 million initially, withdrawing $100,000 a year annually. We're going to run this for 10 years. So let's look at the numbers 10 years out. And then also, I've changed the intervals to 20, 50, 80. That is what happens 20% of the time, what happens 50% of the time, what happens 80% of the time. And this is a little more instructive than the regular defaults, which are that 90-75 set of numbers. The first portfolio we're going to look at is the standard benchmark, and this is 80% standard P 500, 20% this bond fund, which is short-term treasuries. And we can see that in 10 years, there's a 50% chance this thing actually grows a little bit. There's in the 80 percentile, or 20% of the time, this thing's going to grow significantly, and 20% of the time, it's going to shrink significantly. That is, there's an 80% chance it's going to be less than 1.7. There's an 80% chance it's going to be greater than 424. And we can see that if we use that 3.77%, that's at 20, 50, and 80, 80s are highest, we do not hit the required minimum distribution. So this account, if this was what he was invested in, he will not hit the required minimum distribution when he is 72. If we look at the 60-40 portfolio, so that is 40% bonds, 60% S&P 500. This one has lower volatility. This is a lower volatility, lower return. It's only got a 20% chance of hitting the $1 million. So this one definitely is not going to hit the required minimum distribution. Now, if we go look at this crazy leveraged portfolio, we can see in here we've got 15% 2x QQQ, and this is a 2x S&P 500. Otherwise, it's got about 30% bonds and a myriad of other investments, including a fair amount of foreign. Here, this investment, there's a 50% chance it hits 1.6. There's an 80% chance it hits 2.8. A little bit higher return. And in this one, there is a 20% chance in the 80 percentile that you're going to go over that 3.77. So with this portfolio, this individual will have a higher required minimum distribution than his 100,000. So it exceeds it slightly. What have we figured out here? So first of all, the portfolio matters. If it's in a portfolio that makes more money, there's more of a chance that you're going to hit the required minimum distribution. The plan is actually pretty accurate. Based upon his portfolio, there's a very small chance he'll hit the required minimum distribution at 72. And then also his observation that the portfolio is growing is also consistent with an aggressive portfolio. So he's got an aggressive portfolio. This thing is climbing up. All of that is consistent with the initial state. However, we need to be reminded that required minimum distribution goes up with age. So yeah, when you hit that 72, 73, it's 3.77%. But 10 years later, it's 5.41, almost 2% higher 10 years later. And if you've got a portfolio that's growing, that percentage is growing, there's a chance you're going to hit it. Let's take a look at that. The crazy leverage, we can see that in year 12, if we do that, 82 is 1.8 million is that critical number. So we can see in year 2 we hit that. There's a 50% chance we hit that 1.8. So somewhere in here, so 82 is actually out here at year 20. So somewhere in here, there's a 50% chance of hitting that required minimum distribution. So even though you might not hit it when you're 72, this thing's going to continue to grow and you will hit the required minimum distribution somewhere in here. Now, if it's on the high side, you're going to hit it much earlier. On the low side, you may miss it. All right, so looking at the 80-20 S&P 500 portfolio, we can see there's a 50% chance, that's this line here. Looking at the Monte Carlo simulation trends, that it's going to go decline. So somewhere between 50 and 80%, this thing is going to hit required minimum distribution. And if we change the interval, I iterated a few times to find this 70% line. That is, there's a 30% chance you are going to hit the RMD with this standard S&P 500 portfolio. So even a less aggressive than our simulated person's portfolio, you're going to hit it. The other question we can answer with the portfolio visualizer is, how much do I need to pull out annually to have an 80% probability of success? And the answer is actually 21%. It's significantly more than you would think. So if we look at the trends, what I did was I changed the cash withdrawal rate up here. I walked it up from 100,000, walked it all the way up to 210,000. So that's this blue line. So there's a 80% chance that you will drive this account to zero by pulling out 210,000. There's a 50% chance that somewhere in year 7 or 8 this will go to zero, and there's a 20% chance that this will go to zero in year 5. Makes sense. And this again is the most aggressive portfolio. So what have we figured out? Well, first of all, the portfolio does matter. Assuming that you're in the more aggressive portfolio, if the IRA balance is climbing, you are likely to hit RMD. To be certain that you're not going to hit the RMD, that IRA balance needs to be decreasing each year. You can do that in a couple ways. You can invest less aggressively. You can pull more money out. So if you pull money out, so don't pull out 100,000, pull out that somewhere between 100 and 210,000 out every year, so that balance does go down. Or you can pull out $100,000 and simply pay the taxes, because you're making good money and you got enough to pay the taxes. Alrighty, so that concludes this analysis this morning. Reminder that the portfolio visualizer Monte Carlo simulation is particularly useful in figuring out these scenarios going into the future, whether it's a 90% chance of success or it's a 90% chance the other way of having too much money. So we can look at our situation over the range of possible outcomes. And that range is pretty big, as you can see. Alrighty, and with that, top of the morning. Adieu.